Hello, friends. Welcome back to the School of Self Worth. I'm your host, Nicole Song. Today, we have got a hot topic on tap. It has been a big topic for many of you recently. And so I wanted to take the time to go a little deeper today on the podcast. And this one is one that surprised me and yet didn't surprise me in terms of like how much it was affecting so many of you in your leadership at work and your ability to be a really grounded and calm person. And this is what we get to talk about: how to be less emotionally reactive at work. And this one is especially important for Asian American women who are already occupying less than 3% of leadership positions in corporate America. But it's also a topic for anybody who wants to be doing better in their job. They want to improve and grow and expand. So I would say this is really relevant for any high achiever. And it's also especially relevant for any high achiever who wants to support the women around them, the Asian American women who might be struggling to get recognized, to get promoted, that this is something that can really block you. So I'll be getting into why this is impacting you so much and the way you're handling work and the way you're perceived at work as well. And before we get going, if you are an AAPI woman who wants to manifest a promotion in 60 days while working 20% fewer hours, DM me promotion on Instagram at Nicole Song, and I've got something there for you. Okay, friends, let's get into this awesome conversation. Hey, friends. So I was recently in New York for a trip to see my mentor, some of my business besties, and to really take time to focus on the vision for my business, which I find to be an essential thing that I need to do. But New York is also a pretty big trip. I live in Seattle. I have to go all the way across the country, 3 time zones, and it can be a big impact on me physically and energetically. And then add on top of that, just a week and a half after that trip, I am headed out very soon to lead a 5-day retreat for the women in my mastermind. And it's the only in person event that I lead every year. It is so impactful, it is so huge. I love doing it, and it's a lot. So, October is a big month for me. And I knew this headed into October. Like I had all of these very well in my sights as I headed here. And I share this with you because the old me, the old version of me would very easily freak out with this much going on. For me being away from home, I'm a very like home structure grounded person. So when I travel a lot, when I'm going from thing to thing and I'm not settled in terms of where I'm sleeping, how I'm eating, my exercise routine, and all of those things, I can totally get very reactive. This is just a pattern of mine that I had for a really long time. And I would get a little bit angry. I would probably get into the like, don't you dare give me any feedback or suggestions right now when I don't have the capacity that I normally would. And part of the reason I used to get so upset in situations like this is I didn't really understand emotions. And I didn't really understand also what was causing me to be so reactive and to get so upset. So in this situation, you might say, okay, it's obvious you're traveling a lot, you're leading a lot, like that would cause it. But sometimes I think we don't even recognize the obvious things in front of us. And so I wanted to share the experience of my life right now so that you can understand how you can start to implement and change the way that you are reacting and go from reaction into response in your life rather than being in this place of upset or angry or blaming other people. But before we get into the way to do that, I want to talk first about emotions. So, emotions are funny in that we are not taught them in general in this country. Like, people are not taught to have emotions, to feel emotions, to manage their emotions. I think things are improving over time, but I know that for myself, I didn't learn them at school. And on top of it, I grew up in a family that did not discuss emotions. I mean, it was like Chinese culture. We didn't talk about our emotions in any way. Logic and reason ruled the day with my immigrant parents. And I don't blame them in any way. I had an experience with my mom recently where we were talking about something emotional and she just sort of ended the conversation. And I was like, oh, okay, like this, it's just a practice that we have to learn. So I didn't really get asked ever growing up how I felt. And as an adult, I had learned to suppress by the time I got to adulthood. And I definitely thought you were supposed to suppress in work environments to be professional. And so what happened is when you suppress your emotions, it actually makes them worse. And so just so you know, like that was my pattern. And I know that for many of you out there, this is also likely the pattern because if you're being emotionally reactive, it's because you're not feeling your emotions. And so even to this day, I have to often ask myself, but Nicole, how do you feel? And I have to ask my clients this all the time because will logic and reason things to death. I know my women, if you're a high achiever, this is so common. So if you're constantly logicking everything, you are never going to get to the heart of like that, what that emotion is. But the other important thing to remember about emotions is that they are intended to move. If you look at the word emotion, it's a movement, it's an energy. You're not supposed to get stuck in it. So, say for example, you're pissed off. If you're in a pissed off, angry spiral and you don't let that move through you, you can be stuck there for months, for years. It can turn into rage, which is not a healthy emotion. That's quite toxic to be in rage. So, if you are in that experience, that is not how emotions are supposed to work. But the cool thing is that we are human. We do all feel emotions. And so I always want to normalize emotions, that it is normal to have them and also understand how to manage them. So fear is another one that comes up all the time. A lot of my clients get super stuck in fear, especially the newer entrepreneur business women. And this is where perfectionism can really cause major problems. And perfectionism comes from this fear. You're so afraid of getting it wrong or failing or having people judge you that you freeze and you don't act. So rather than you live in your compensation for fear rather than experiencing your fear and getting to the other side of it. We work on this a ton in my course, Your Clear Calling. Like, what is it? What is the experience of emotions? How to move through them? How to actually get to the other side of them? And what is that like? Because staying in them again, that's where a lot of people they just get stuck in it for a long time. I saw this during the pandemic where people were stuck in fear, and some people are probably still stuck in fear from the pandemic. And a lot of people were in that crazy fear place for a very long time. So, now that we've looked at emotions and the spectrum of emotions, let's talk about how this is taking place for you at work. So, when you're emotionally reactive, typically what's happening is you're taking things extremely personally. When I was a reporter, I got so reactive to feedback. And in reporting, we got feedback constantly. Like you got edited for every single story. And the way all those software systems worked is you got edited and read. So you would send your story in, it's like beautiful and black, and then you would get it back from your editor. And it was like sometimes, I mean, literally covered in red, lined out paragraphs, suggestions galore. And when I was younger, I would get so activated. I would feel so stressed. I would plummet. Like end of the day for me at work was a terrible time because that's when you would get edited when you were on deadline and I would be sure that I was going to get fired, that they were judging me, that they thought I was horrible at my job, that I was the worst reporter on the planet, that they should never give me another story. I would never get another project that was cool. I was definitely not cut out to be a reporter. Like I literally really believe this for a very long time. And that feedback would bring up all of that fear. It would bring, and this is happening on a daily basis. So you can imagine I was on this crazy roller coaster all the time at work. But then I learned something that changed everything. And this really made all the difference for me as I learned that the feedback I was getting was just supposed to help me grow. It was never personal. They were definitely not going to fire me. It was all about helping me and the story to be better. And so when I recognized that, and then I had to do a lot of work to not get activated still by the feedback, but when I understood that, it helped me really start to see it for the truth of what it is. So if you're taking feedback personally at work, it's because you think it's about you. And there's a lot to unpack there if that is going on for you, but I wanted to start to give you a sense of what it is that is causing it. And so that you can start to get into a place where you're not getting in a reaction where you're afraid you're doing something wrong. You're not getting defensive. You're not getting angry. You're not getting upset. Because when we're in those places, you are not showing up as a leader at work. really starting to understand how to manage yourself emotionally. I would say that that was one of the biggest skill sets that I have learned in, 3 different careers. Because the more that I can stay steady and calm and grounded, no matter what the circumstances are, the more effective I am, the more people trust me, and the more people want me to be in charge. I mean, have you looked at the leaders, really good leaders? I'm not talking about all leaders, but the most effective leaders are super calm. They are really grounded. Like, no matter what is going on, they are really good. But the tendency for most of us is that when something comes up and pushes our buttons, is we blame the person who said it. We blame, like I would blame my editors. Trust me, all the time. I would blame my editors. To blame the person who's saying something. If you're feeling emotionally activated by your family, you might be like, well, they should stop saying that. Has anyone ever said? Have you ever done that? My mom really needs to stop saying that to me. Or my sister or brother really needs to stop saying that. And it's so fascinating how we like to put that on the other person. You're like, I feel so wrong. They feel so angry. And I'm not saying that other people around us can't elevate themselves, but why are we spending so much of our energy putting it on somebody else? Because when you're doing that, what's actually happening is you have a button and you've officially said, I have a huge button that you can push. That when you say that, I get upset. And it's not really about them not pushing the button. It's about, why do you have a button to push? That's the real question. Why do you have a button that anybody else can trigger something within you? And looking at those buttons is really important. Like, how do we start to clean out the things that are causing us to, like, even be able to get activated by all of the stuff that's going on, whether it's work, whether it is family members or something else. But I just really wanted to look at that first, right? That's the piece for you to understand. It's never really personal, and occasionally it's personal, but even if it's personal, it doesn't really matter. The question is why you are letting that person, right? This is, to me, the equivalent of giving your power away. When you have a button, you're giving your power away to the person because they can now push it, and now you're getting all upset, and then they win, right? That's the energy of somebody. Also, the people who intentionally push buttons, that is fully their energy. They are trying to take away your power. They feel stronger and smarter when they can get you upset and reactive. So the real skill is no reaction, zero, none. Like, you do not react. You are zen, you're calm. Whenever somebody says something that seems upsetting, you're just like, oh, interesting. Because that is actually the only way you can learn, in that moment. That's the only way you can start to be like, oh, it's interesting. This person's interesting that they would say that, rather than being like, that person's wrong and horrible, and, all the judgment that can come pouring out. Instead, being curious, right? Curious is like a very non reactive way to deal with that. And so, we're looking at what is causing us to have those buttons be pushed. So let's go back to my example of me traveling twice this month and leading. I could have a button that's you could push because I'm worried I'm not going to, be grounded enough or spend enough time with my family before I go to lead my retreat. And if I can recognize that button exists, then I can also make sure I'm doing the things that's going to make me feel good, which is spend time with my family. You see what I'm saying? So we have to really start to understand, what are the buttons, what is causing them to be pushed, what we can do to take back our own power to not let that be such a challenge. And once you start to identify the major things that could be causing reaction, that is a huge first step, right? That awareness of what is really causing this reaction, to start to get to the other side. And in my flex calibration formula, a lot of the work is learning to stay grounded no matter what's going on around you. So even if in the moment you get unexpected feedback from your boss and it's like, wow, that came from nowhere, you can stay grounded and clear, non reactive, no buttons in that moment. And this is really essential to getting promoted and being a leader. I mean, people want people who can take feedback. They want people who don't take it personally, who are saying, oh, wow, thank you so much. And now I can grow from that. And you'll notice, like, the true leaders are unflappable. And by the way, leaders above you at work are dealing with problems that are way bigger than you can understand or comprehend. Trust me, they are dealing with problems that are so far beyond what you have to deal with. And the really great ones are unflappable about it. They're like, okay, wow, this is a lot. And let's figure this out. Let's be calm about it. And so when you can really look around, like I always like to look at the people who are modeling what I want to do, what I want to be. And they are always the people, they're smooth. They don't get thrown off. They are in that really steady place. And this is truly an essential part of my new model, get paid for your passion. Like, how can you expect to get promoted if you're getting upset over the tiny things? And so, how can we learn to be the person who doesn't get upset over the tiny things, to stay steady? And, it's really the equivalent of like you are upset all the time. It's like if you were in a boat and it had a hole in it and it was getting filled with water, and you're just standing there screaming and freaking out instead of bailing the water. Like, do you want to be that person who's freaking out rather than being in action to get yourself out of an emergency? I know that I want to be the person who's bailing water, coming up with a solution, figuring out something that's going on rather than, having my boat fill with water and then have to swim it out or do whatever, right? And save my life. So learn to master your emotional reactions. And I promise that will change your life truly. So just start by checking in. Where are those buttons that are getting pushed? How do I start to navigate them? How do I start to not have those buttons? It's not about the other people. Remember, how do I change the buttons and so that I'm not getting activated and that I can start to make some change for myself? So if you want the exact step by step for the get paid for your passion model to master your emotional reactions, DM me. DM me grounded on Instagram at Nicole Song and let's chat because I've got something to share with you that's so powerful that will really help you get to the other side of that and be the person who gets promoted, works 20% less, and really is recognized and breaking cycles and the ceiling. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much. I can't wait to tune in with you again next week.